I dropped out of my freshman year of college when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. I had just turned 19, and although I was legally an adult, I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like a failure for dropping out, but I focused on being a parent and worked nights as a server and eventually a bartender. Everything was about as okay as it could be until shifts became more and more scarce at the restaurant I was working at. I desperately wanted more money to care for myself and my daughter, and I wanted it much faster than it would have taken to finish my degree. Anyways, I knew that bartenders made significantly more money in the city, so I started searching for job postings online. Ultimately, though, my searches were fruitless. I ended up being reached out to by a friend named Maurice that had worked at the restaurant briefly before he was recruited by another friend to work at some bar in the city. I trusted his judgment, so I agreed to come interview for the position. The people here are rich Kel, filthy rich. But they're assholes. You're gonna need to have thick skin. I didn't mind. I was thrilled. I showed up for my interview on a Thursday night in September. I remember viscerally feeling the stark contrast between the bustling city street and the bleak, faceless building. No windows, no name. 6 stairs led down to a solid black door that I half-heartedly trusted to be the entrance to my new job. The place was beautiful. Warm, dim lighting softly illuminated black marble, high-top tables. Most of the tables were empty, but it was a Thursday after all. A couple were occupied with well-dressed women that looked to be in their 40s. One looked at me up and down with a condescending smile. I peered down at my own clothing, tugging slightly on the hem of my blouse. A man came walking briskly towards me from what seemed to be the kitchen. He was short with jet black hair that seemed intentionally oily. "Kelly?" he asked, offering out his hand. He introduced himself as Craig and walked me to a table near the back. It was made clear that the job was already mine, and I was so grateful to Maurice in that moment for speaking well of me. Craig made copies of my ID and had me fill out some standard paperwork. "Now, Kelly, honey, I don't know how much Maurice has told you about our little spot. The nature of the work here is unique." I nodded my head, noticing Maurice out of the corner of my eye, standing behind the bar. He looked stressed. "Yes, sir, he's told me some," I responded, aiming to look interested and focused. "Our clientele is very affluent. They expect stellar service. They come to our place here not just for food and drinks, but entertainment. Most of them are also very private," he said, looking down and shuffling through papers. "I understand. If you choose to accept the position, you'll be signing a non-disclosure agreement. Nothing crazy. Some of our customers have very high-ranking positions in the community and would rather the details of their leisure not be shared." I have to be honest, I was a bit taken aback by this part. I also had no experience in a place of this caliber, so I kept my mouth shut and nodded in agreement. "Maurice will train you behind the bar and brief you on the rules." "Great. One last thing. Assuming you'll accept our offer, your employment will be contingent upon a reasonable score on our aptitude test. It'll take you maybe 15 minutes. You'll receive a link in your email." I agreed, shook Craig's hand, and he sent me behind the bar with Maurice. I was admittedly pretty excited to see Maurice. I always considered him a good friend, but he seemed distracted and tense. I attributed it to the stress of the job. Maurice began by showing me around the bar and going through the details of the drink menu. I listened intently and waited for the email with the link to pop up. Eventually my phone dinged. "Is that the test?" "Yeah, but we can finish up here." "Just take it now," he said quickly, vigorously shining champagne glasses. I pulled up a stool and opened up the link. The first half or so of the test was like any other aptitude test I'd taken online following job applications. Soon the questions became more complex, more clinical. I clicked next, and a black and white abstract photo materialized on the screen. It looked like an elk. I was prompted to choose a multiple choice answer based on my first impression of the picture. "Is this a freaking ink blot test?" "Maurice, I can't help you, Kel. Just do your best." "Sorry, are you okay?" I asked. "Fine, Kel, listen. You're gonna make a shit ton of money here." Do you see the 4 ladies in total here tonight? I scanned the room. Yes, I'm leaving with no less than 450 tonight. Tomorrow at least double. You'll do just as well. But it's rough here sometimes. Just be prepared. I began to wonder if he'd had a fight with his wife. Maybe one of the table ladies pissed him off. But the thought of that much money gave me chills. I could definitely afford a 2-bedroom working here. I just agreed with him and submitted my test. A few moments later, Maurice excused himself to the back and returned with a small stack of papers. One at a time, he slapped the papers down on the bar top from left to right. Non-disclosure, rules, contract. Contract, I asked. For the rules. That's why I set the rules down first. Not as chipper as I remember you, Maurice. The matte black paper containing the rules nearly blended with the bar top and stood in deep contrast to the other 2 papers. Fancy, I noted. He flipped the paper over, revealing a list of rules, beautifully written in white ink. Those in maroon jackets are to be ignored completely, no matter what they say or how they behave. If someone calls you, look before you respond. It may be inside your head, and a verbal response to a false call is equivalent to speaking to a maroon coat. Our guests expect a high caliber of service. You must not deny any request from a guest. Bartenders must not enter the storage room or cooler under any circumstances. I remember thinking this was insane. Surely I missed the part where this was some kind of dinner theater, an elaborate joke. The sober look on Maurice's face stopped me in my tracks. I thought of my daughter's face. What's the most you ever made in a weekend? 2,800. My underdeveloped frontal lobe took over and my hand grabbed the pen. The following day was a Friday and I was expected back at 5 p.m. I slipped in the door 15 minutes early, my black top damp from the autumn drizzle outside. I shivered and tucked my bag into a cubby behind the bar. Maurice was engaged in conversation with a woman about 50 with stylish grey hair. It was a bit busier this evening, and slow jazz music warmed the atmosphere. The stylish 50-something peered over at me from her conversation with Maurice, a curious look on her face. She sidestepped and slid onto a bar stool across from where I was standing. "Good evening," she said warmly, settling into her seat. "I'm Penny." She was very beautiful with deeply saturated emerald eyes. I introduced myself, knowing she probably already inquired about me. "Penny, she's brand new. You can order from me," Maurice said. "Can I not say hello? Besides, I need something you don't have." Maurice smiled sarcastically and began cutting limes. "Kelly, I just need a charger. Do you have one? For this?" She held up an iPhone in pristine condition, and almost the same shade of emerald as her eyes. I told her I was sorry that I didn't have an Apple phone, and asked her if she'd asked anyone else. The room seemed to go dead quiet. I felt my smile fading as I watched Miss Penny's do the same. "Kel, you have to get her a charger," Maurice said, never looking up from the limes. "Oh, okay, I can." Across the street, there's a gas station. Unbelievable. So I crossed the very busy street in the rain to grab unprepared Miss Penny a charger for her fancy iPhone. No biggie, I brought it back, and she thanked me warmly, sliding me a $50 bill. The thing was $7.99. "Keep it." A few moments later, Maurice introduced me to the bar back, Nemo. He was a very short older man with a bad limp. Maurice told me he'd been here 15 years. Because we weren't allowed in the storage room or the cooler, we had to ask Nemo for pretty much everything when we ran out. I felt horrible having to ask him for so much as time went on, but I kept reminding myself that I didn't make the rules. I would come to find that he was a very sweet and gentle man, and he even showed me photos of his grandchildren. Things became very busy that night, and Nemo, Maurice, and I were running around quite a bit. Around 9 p.m., a man sauntered over to the bar wearing a hooded maroon raincoat. He sat down near the corner of the bar, folding his hands on the bar top. He kept his hood on, but the anticipation of how he looked underneath made my heart start beating faster. I started to feel increasingly nauseated as the seconds went on. Maurice walked past me carrying a tray of appetizers. "Ignore him," he said in passing. I continued serving customers and faking smiles. The tip jar was filling up rapidly, and I could count at least 15 $20 bills from where I was standing. Because everything was going smoothly until an apparently tipsy Miss Penny sashayed her way up to an opening at the bar top. "Honey, the charger you gave me isn't working." "The cheap thing. Let me borrow your phone a moment to check in at home." I really didn't want to do that, considering I liked having my phone on me in case my daughter needed to reach me, or I wanted to check in on her. She raised her eyebrows in an impatient manner, and I handed over my unlocked phone. "Thanks, just a moment or two." I watched her bring my phone back to her table, where she was sitting with 3 other middle-aged ladies. I didn't believe that none of her friends had a phone she could borrow, but I decided to let it go and continue working. Moments later, I heard a variety of different laughs coming from Miss Penny's table. The sounds ranged from stifled giggles to full-on roaring laughter. Leaning over the bar and peering closer, I can see that the ladies are huddled together, looking at and laughing at my phone. A burning sensation of anger and humiliation rose from the base of my spine to the top of my head. I shook Maurice's shoulder. "Maurice, they are looking through my phone. They're laughing at something on my phone." He shrugged and continued working. I was beyond furious at my helplessness. My open eyes stung with the start of tears. "Hey, forget about it. You're doing a good job." "Tear it up, girl," somebody cheered from the bar top. I looked around, terrified to see the maroon man with his hood down, smiling and cheering me on. My heart dropped as I saw the black circles under his eyes and nearly completely rotted teeth. He was smiling excessively and nodding my way. "Tear it up, girl." His face was peppered with raised scars, all in different stages of healing. Was he being supportive or ridiculing me? I couldn't tell. I quickly turned my head towards Maurice, who was sporting a very concerned look. He slowly gave me a thumbs up. "Ignore it," he reminded me. "Tear it up," I repeated to Maurice. Maybe like break a leg? Knock him down, I don't know. But ignore it." I nodded and continued working, ignoring my frustration with the bullies at the table, mocking my entire life. Around 10 p.m. I heard someone call me from the kitchen. "Kelly, your mom's on the phone. It's about your daughter. Something about a peanut." Shit, that wench had my phone and I missed a call. Something's wrong. I slammed the unopened beer in my hand down on the cooler and turned on my heel to race to the kitchen when Maurice grabbed my shoulder hard. "What?" I shouted. "Where are you going?" "My daughter's on the phone. She has an allergy. I have to check." "I didn't hear anything, Kelly." "You always must check if someone else heard it." "Maybe you weren't listening," I said, breathing shakily and shivering. "I'm always listening. You're okay. Take a seat for a minute. Take a break," he said in a soothing tone. I was steadily losing trust in Maurice too. Tears stung my eyes again as they traveled over to the maroon man. He held up a dirty napkin with the words, "Tear it up," written in god-awful writing. He was nodding and giggling like a child. He was really starting to piss me off. Looking more closely at the maroon man's artwork, I could see that the letters looked to be written in a perfect crimson color. I grimaced and strained my eyes to see more closely. In his right hand he held a small box opener, and his left arm was dripping blood. "Maurice," he looked over almost instinctively at the maroon man. "There's nothing we can do unless a guest requests him to be removed," he said. The sting of tears had become a full-blown stream falling down my cheeks as my nervous system lit up with terror. An older man with a white beard caught wind of Maroon Man's bleeding and seemed mildly disgusting at best. He beckoned Maurice over with the curl of his finger, and Maurice disappeared to the back. A few moments later, a man in a white coat escorted the maroon back to the kitchen and what I assumed to be out the back door. Relief washed over me, and I started breathing more deeply. I felt sorry for the man. I wanted to go home. I wanted to see my daughter. I was mixing a drink for a woman at Penny's table when an ear-splitting, visceral scream came cascading from the kitchen into the bar. It sounded like an animal being gutted alive. "Maurice, did you hear that?" I said breathlessly. He turned his head away from me, grinding a lime into the bottom of a mojito glass. "No, I don't hear anything." I brought the pretentious drink over to Penny's pretentious drunk friend, and Penny finally gave my phone back. She looked me up and down like a predator and told me she's glad my blonde phase stayed in the past. She slid $100 bill across the table and thanked me for my entertainment. I continued making drinks, watching the tip jar fill to an unjustifiable volume, and sustaining comments and requests that were berating at best from various customers. I was asked to show a man my tattoos, even the ones I had to unbutton my top to access. One man refused to let me button my shirt back up until I sang the national anthem for him, his eyes covering my skin the whole time. 12 a.m. came, and it was clear we weren't getting a break from work or otherwise. I needed the money badly, and as long as I left in one piece, I was planning on sustaining the night. Nemo came and stood next to me, putting his hand on top of mine. "It's gonna be okay, honey. You stay, or you finish your contract and never come back again. Either way, you're gonna be okay. I'm not coming back tomorrow, Nemo. The money I make tonight will hold me over until I find something else," I said, wiping off a liquor-soaked menu. Nemo's eyes were saddened, and he lifted his hand off of my own. "You don't have a choice, Kelly. Didn't you know?" "Of course I have a choice, Nemo. They can sue me if they want to, but they can't drag me into this fucking place." He paused, looking at me like he was mourning me at my own funeral. "You'd be lucky if they only dragged you back. Think of your daughter." I backed away from Nemo at that point, shaking my head in disbelief. He's crazy too, my only friend. 1 a.m. came, and I had 2 more hours in hell before I would leave this place, file a police report, and never ever return. The youngest man I'd seen at the bar yet sat directly across from where I was standing, cutting fruit. "Is this Kelly?" he asked Maurice, as if I couldn't speak for myself. Maurice nodded, clearly annoyed. You could feel the history between them. The man was obviously already drunk. "Kelly, have you met Maurice's wife?" he asked, tilting his head to the side. I shook my head, exhausted. "How about you call her and let's play a little prank on her?" Maurice's face turned to stone, and he gripped tightly on the bottle opener in his hand. "Let's have you call Toya and tell her Maurice is leaving her for you, that he was too much of a little bitch to tell her himself," he said. Sneering like a badly behaved child, my face burned with embarrassment. Are all the rich so sadistic? Just then, the man with the infatuation with my tattoos sat next to sneering trust fund boy, wrapping his arm around his shoulder, drunkenly engaging him in conversation and relieving the tension for a moment. "Go take a break," I whispered to Maurice, hoping the man would forget his request. Maurice snuck off into the kitchen. "So, Ronnie, you've met Kelly, huh? Doesn't she have the sexiest tattoos?" the older man asked, making unwelcomed eye contact with me. The drunken young man nodded, uninterested and looking at his phone now. "I really like the one with the little dove." "My favorite too, sir," I remarked, smiling against my will. It was true, I'd gotten it for my daughter. "Lets you let me have that one, huh?" he slurred. You want the same tattoo? By all means, I won't get you for copyright infringement," I said playfully, immediately feeling tense from my boldness. "No, I want that one," he said, cocking head to the side and smiling gleefully. He slid something green and plastic out of his pocket, clicking a level with his thumb to expose the tip of a box cutter. My heart pounded in my chest, and my vision went blurry. There was no way the guests could take things this far. I looked around, silently begging anyone to have the decency to interject. My hands went cold, my fingers twitching. I peered at the exit to see the bouncer with his massive arms crossed, centering himself in front of the door. Hypervigilance took over, and I scanned the room desperately. Maurice was gone, and I knew he wouldn't be able to help me anyways. He was under contract too, fucking contract. The two Machiavellian men grasped each other's shoulders, laughing at my distress. "Come on now, I'm a good tipper, sweetheart. Just the little dove," the tattoo fetishist cooed. I continued scanning the environment, my body paralyzed with fear. The rules lay on the back counter, a death threat with an elegant font. The box cutter in the monster's hand, the doorman, the phone, Nemo, all of it useless. The bloody napkin lay on the tiled floor, riddled with shoe marks from the ongoing evening. A note from my psychotic cheerleader. Arguably the best part of the night, all things considered. Tear it up. Tear it up. The fucking contract. There's antibacterial soap in the back. May I wash my arm first? He frowned in consideration and nodded, shrugging. Quickly, I walked with tears in my eyes into the kitchen. I scrubbed my arm to prepare for a procedure fit for the Saw franchise. I turned to check the back door, and it was chained shut. I peered out into the bar area, beckoning for Nemo. He came limping over. I asked Nemo to type a message to my daughter that I loved her in case something went sideways here before I got to go home for the night. My hands are too shaky, I said, tears streaming down my face. He nodded and took my phone, squinting and typing with one finger. Why are you even here, Nemo? If you know how bad it is, why are you here? Without looking up, he told me about his sick wife and her medical bills, his family in another country, and some other unfortunate circumstances. I felt bad for him, I really did. Life is hard. Nemo's handed back my phone before his eyes widened with trepidation, noticing the butcher's knife pressed up against his stomach. Kelly, open the storage room. Now I spat, pressing the knife slightly into the tough membrane holding his guts together. He raised his hands above his head in surrender. They'll kill me for this, he begged. My contract, rip it apart, I said, being mindful of where I was standing so as not step into the storage room. He scanned the storage room hastily, then pulled down a small metal lockbox from one of the shelves. With shaking hands, he reached for the keys in his pocket and unlocked it. He pulled out a stack of papers, the top page, a copy of my ID stapled onto my contract. Maurice's too, I said calmly. He looked up at me with confusion and began to chuckle softly with tears in his eyes. Maurice doesn't have a contract. This is his place. Maurice owns the place. He owns you. I felt the bile rise into my throat. My entire body was on fire. I trusted him. He'd met my daughter, my family. Tear it up, Nemo. He ripped the contract down the middle, his tears dropping onto the pieces. When the two halves of my contract fell to the storage room floor, another stack of papers remained in Nemo's hands, a copy of a man's ID stapled to another contract. I took it from Nemo's hand and looked closely to see the picture of a young man, a much younger, less broken and disheveled version of the maroon man. What is this, Nemo? I whispered. He fulfilled his contract. He was what you become after. He broke his only rule by trying to get you out. I left that night and never returned. I work a minimum wage job now, and my daughter and I still live in a one-bedroom apartment. I wouldn't have it any other way.